Recovery is stupendous.
Achievable.
Hope.
Freedom.
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 Empowering.
It's unique to everyone.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Getting a new lease on life.
It's finding restoration after you fall down.
Recovery is having the freedom to enjoy life.
For me, it was finding a way to really love myself.
My recovery is possible in part because of my own sense of purpose.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Montana's Peer Network's Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Andy Daniel, the social media coordinator for MPN. This is one of our spotlight podcasts, and I'm here with Rosie and Ryan from Grand Street Theater, who are with Every Brilliant Thing, which is a show that is traveling across Montana this summer. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Hi. How did you first find the show?
My friend Cal Poole, who's the managing director at Grand Street Theater in Helena, he sent me the play to read over email one weekend after we had had a little conversation about it. And I read a lot of plays every year. He was interested in having me come from Missoula, which is where I live, and direct Every Brilliant Thing. And I took a look at it, read it quickly in one night, and immediately fell in love with the piece. Cried and laughed for 3 days straight, and knew immediately that I wanted to do something different, that I really wanted to be a part of the production by being on stage rather than directing, which is something I don't do as often anymore. But with this piece, it just hit me in a very personal and intense way, and I couldn't imagine not living with this piece for a while.
Great. How about you, Ryan?
I was kind of living between Atlanta and New York City, and had not auditioned for anything in a few years. I am a writer, so as a result, am very picky about projects that I get involved with as an actor. A little bit judgmental, and it was this past December, and I had just re-upped my Backstage account and was looking for things to audition for, and I came across this, and it sort of blew my mind in that the thing that I get most excited about with any project, whether that's working as an educator, I was working as a tour guide for a while in New York, is just that it sort of covers more than one base, that it serves more than one purpose. So as far as acting jobs go, unfortunately, like a lot of times, it's things that might be really fun personally to do, but don't feel that meaningful or like they're actually contributing something in a way where if I were doing something else, I would feel like I was actually helping society be a better place. And so it feels weird to set aside time to work on acting projects that are not holistic in a certain way, that are not engaged spiritually or politically or socially. And so when I came across this, I buckled down and spent a few hours on my video audition, and I got a call about a month later.
So Rosie's from Montana, and you said Atlanta and New York?
Yeah, mostly a New Yorker. So I grew up just outside of the city in Southern Connecticut, and then have kind of been looking for a new place. I've spent most of my adult life in New York City, but I have roots in Montana. So my father grew up in western Montana in a town called Thompson Falls. So I used to visit my grandparents there when I was a kid, and so my uncles are pretty involved in their respective communities here. My Uncle Tom ran the newspaper in Thompson Falls, took it over from my grandfather, and then my Uncle Jack has worked in the school system for a long time. He's the superintendent of schools of Flathead County. So I have a lot of love for the state, and once upon a time when I dropped out of acting school and kind of needed a little fresh air and wanted to do some writing and kind of reconsider options career-wise, and so I went and lived with my Uncle Tom for 3 months, and kind of fell in love with the state.
Cool.
Yeah.
Rosie, you said that you laughed and cried for 3 days when you read it. Can you tell us a little bit about your initial reaction to the show?
Yeah, I had. I didn't expect to fall in love with it so quickly. Cal was so passionate about it and handed me the script, and I came home and thought, I'll read a little bit. It was Sunday night, and in the next week or so, when I get some time off, I'll finish the script. And it was just one of those page turners that I was up half the night and reading it multiple times right off the bat. And what I found is rarely have I seen a piece of theater that had such depth and poignancy, but also carried the humor and levity with dealing with such a serious subject. Of course, this piece is about mental health, mental illness, and suicide. And in order to do that in a play without triggering, without leading the audience in one of those positions where they have felt blindsided by things or walk away with those heavy hearts, this particular piece uses humor and levity in a way which I really respected and related to. I think that I use humor as a main coping skill in my life, and there was something about this piece that just really, it spoke to me and made me so relieved to finally see something that felt closer to my language in theater. Most of the things that I've been able to do activism-wise in the theater have come from my own writing and from my own experience. And I'm not the most amazing playwright. I'm not as good of a writer as Ryan is. So it was a relief to find something that was closer to my language that also had such a national buzz at the time, or international buzz at the time. The HBO video was out at that time. People were talking about it quite a bit. We hadn't had a production yet in Montana, but everyone was amping up for that idea. And on top of that, knowing that that Montana is still #1 in the nation for suicide completion, really felt like this play needed to be done now. And that was part of that 3-day, intensity that I was feeling, was that idea that every once in a while I find a play that like is time sensitive, that I felt like we need to get on this, we need to get the funding, we need to get this piece happening now because the state needs to see it. And I don't want this opportunity to pass and be 5 or 6 years from now and finally producing this in Montana. We need to get this in this state, in these communities as soon as possible.
Ryan, what spoke to you about this script and helped you make the decision to audition?
Sure. Honestly, at first it was I didn't really know the full scope of the play. I hadn't heard of it, and at first only read the audition sides, which were pretty extensive. There were pretty good chunks of the play, and then hearing what the nature of the tour was going to be, what the mission was. But honestly, at first it was just good writing. If there are any auditioning actors out there, you know that's a rarity. That you get excited about just wanting to read the rest of the piece when you see a part of it. And so as I was rehearsing it, it was really that rehearsing for the audition. It was really that the breadth of it. It was really the complexity of it, the ability to encompass good storytelling with humor and with nuance and intelligence. So yeah, initially it was that, and then once I had spoken to Rosie and the managing director from Grand Street on the phone, as I guess they were narrowing down the pool of actors, then I read the full script and was sort of, it really moved me. Honestly, I don't know if we're ready to get heavy, but it was in January, and at least on the East Coast, in my experience, I get pretty gnarly seasonal depression.
Yeah.
it was January, and I was looking for work, and I was 40 years old at the time. I'm 41 now, and was kind of looking at, low-paying entry-level jobs, as actors do from time to time. I don't know, it was just feeling a little bit of despair and kind of hopelessness. And as far as the timing that Rosie was referring to goes, that was personally really sort of inexplicable and moving to me, that in this moment of just wondering, asking existential, like, large questions and feeling underemployed, that this play, which is literally about all of the small things that make life worth living, came along. It became pretty essential for me to try and get the job.
Like the universe was telling you something.
Yeah, absolutely. At the risk of sounding magical. Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about the script?
Ooh, yes. So Duncan McMillan is the writer. He took a bunch of his personal experiences as well experiences of friends and family, and he had written a short story and then employed his friend Johnny Donahoe, who is a brilliant stand-up comedian in the UK, to help him revise it and rewrite it into a play. And the two of them debuted it at the Edinburgh Festival, and since then were working it and reworking it for a while. It is about the story of a child who, at 7, their mother attempts suicide for the first time. And they begin a list of every brilliant thing about the world in order to cope with this idea in their family, this experience. And then we follow this particular child throughout their life, storytelling-wise, in their experience of what that looked like the rest of their existence till now, how that manifested in their relationships and in their family.
Mm-hmm. And so the list is sort of the storytelling device throughout it, where you are starting with number 1 on the list at 7 years old, ice cream, and then you follow that list, which the main character continues. And just to clarify, Rosie and I take turns playing that main character. You follow that list through, what all of a sudden a brilliant thing means to the character in high school, and then in college, and then falling in love and getting married. Spoiler alert. The marriage falling apart. And so through all of these ups and downs throughout life, having that reference point for the character, which to me is an analog for any number of things, but personally for artwork, for having a medium, for having a practice that is outside of yourself, that's outside of your head, that you can refer back to as a touchstone.
Yeah, well, and something that's really unique about this show is that it's not just one of you standing up there on the stage for an hour. There's audience participation, but it's in a nice...
It's gentle.
It's gentle. That's a good word. It's gentle. Yeah. It's you don't have to come up with stuff on your own. We don't embarrass you too much. I think you guys are probably good at reading who would be open to more involvement. But
Ryan and I greet the audience for the first half hour and pass out cards from our list of every brilliant thing, asking people to read them during the show for us. And during that time, we get to gauge, who is pliable, who's interested in kind of interacting, and who is more comfortable being a passive audience member. So there's active and passive audience members. We try to make it low danger and gentle and as easy as possible, as well as community driven. It really gets the idea across that that we're all connected, and that there's always some point of identification for all of us, and that really part of the answer is to relate rather than compare when it comes to our lives and our relationships and communities.
Ryan, can you talk about how the tour has been so far? You guys have been, out 2 weeks now? Something like that?
Yeah,
I know you guys are losing track. But,
Yeah,
just
we
over 2
started.
weeks. So we've done 12 shows so far, but yeah, on the road for about 18 days. So how's it been so far? It's been fascinating. I mean, really, there's no way, despite the fact that our director, a woman named Erin Ortman, who's a Helena native, she tried as early as possible to bring in audience members because it's so essential to the realization of the experience,
right,
to have that participation and the improvisation between the actor and the house. Despite that fact, there's really no way to prepare for, every show is going to be different based on so many things, based on the community that we're playing in, and then, every specific audience member that we're engaging with. There are parts where the audience member engages a little bit more, and we cast them as either the character's father or childhood school counselor, things like that. So it's been this amazing lesson in flexibility and listening, gauging, really having to kind of get out of the way and see as much as possible, as quickly as possible, who you're in the room with, who, what people are going to be comfortable with, but also, to a certain extent, what their values are, what level of dialogue or discourse they're comfortable with, how much you can play and tease and kind of have a good time with them versus when you need to sort of pull back and be a little more respectful or be listening rather than trying to present a whole sort of goofy, as a performer, it's tempting, especially as we do the show more, to want to find new stuff and to keep it entertaining for us,
right?
Which is understandable, but for people who are not used to speaking in public, that can be a lot for me to say, come on, like, I've been doing this for 3 weeks, like, let's crack it open a little bit, let's have a good time, as opposed to people who, have either never spoken in public or improvised or things like that, where you of course need to be very gentle with it. So really just making sure to stay connected with the real mission of the tour, which is honesty in that dialogue, but really being as much a voice as an ear, if that's a thing that people say, but taking in the places that we're going to and the individuals that we're dealing with, and listening as much as talking.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how the audiences have been so far? Like, maybe something that surprised you about them, or something unexpected?
Well, we've had quite a variety of audiences, anywhere from 18 to about 100 is what we're kind of in the range of right now. And every community is so different, but yet there's some really universal things that are going on in each audience as well. And as well as, like, culturally in Montana, we have a lot of this idea of, like, cowboy up, pull your bootstraps up, put your big girl panties on, and people talking about those similar themes in each one of those. Last week, Ryan and I talked at length after a couple of the shows about how important it was for us as artists to be vulnerable and how hard that is, but how essential that is for the mission of what we're doing with this show, that we can't just hide behind this character during this particular piece, that it's essential when we do the talkbacks afterwards, which in each community we try to find professionals and lay people, school administrators, anybody or survivors or people with life experience, to come on stage and sit with us and talk with the community about resources in the community, problems or solutions that are happening in that current culture. So in looking at that, Ryan and I started talking about, that importance of us not hiding behind this character and really being vulnerable about why and how we did this. And Ryan was really kind to push me into that a little bit. I was much more comfortable doing it in Helena when I did the run in the fall. But getting out into these communities where I didn't know anybody, it was a little trickier to get over that bump. But the first night that I started sharing in the talkback about my own suicide attempts in high school, and then the depression and suicidal ideations that I had in my late 30s again, and what my coping skills were, and how that had changed so much in 25 years in my recovery, that really opened the community up in a different way. And both of us saw that immediately, and how important that was, and what a force that is when one person can come into a community, or even one person in the current community can crack open that little piece of vulnerability in a way that is so revealing. It really encourages everybody else to be a part of the solution in that very way, which is a big part of getting rid of this stigma in Montana about mental illness, and getting away from these ideas about pull your bootstraps up, and instead really opening to finding connection and solution with each other.
I agree. That was that was an important part of the evolution, which was I've not spent a whole lot of time in this with dealing with this kind of material, sort of presenting this kind of material in public, and so there I think was a period of adjustment to it that started with being having kind of kid gloves on and wanting to be tonally like a little bit austere, a little bit just very careful. And then once I saw the response that was getting, which was that people were being careful in response, that the mental health professionals that we had for our panels were sort of being careful and watching every word, and then the audience was kind of doing the same. It occurred to me that that's part of what we can offer, because for all intents and purposes, I mean, Rosie and I are artists first and foremost.
Yes.
Rather than, neither of us are therapists or counselors or things like this. And so the thing that I realized we do have to offer is this level of this literally professional level of vulnerability. Like that is the practice that we're in, is being able to move sort of fluidly through the world of emotionality and expression in a similar way to where people aren't that comfortable speaking in public, aren't necessarily that comfortable crying every day professionally,
Yeah.
or for the flip side of that being, genuinely getting to these places of silliness and joy. Mm-hmm. And so realizing that was actually something unique that maybe we had to offer in response to that stoicism, or to that culture of wanting to keep things repressed, or not talk about difficult things. So that if there's something that we could bring, it was that frankness, and just letting people see somebody engaging with heavier material and not be weighed down by it, not be kind of crushed by that, but do that in the same evening as that we're dancing and joking around and improvising and being really playful, and recognizing that all of those things can exist in the same world.
And truly, theater as a collaborative art is extremely cathartic. Yes. As well as one of the most efficient vehicles for empathy. It really helps us to take a walk in someone else's shoes, or be able to see things that we haven't yet put words or actions onto out loud in front of us in that way. it's a quick access to our emotions and our brain in a way that other things don't always get to. And live theater in particular, like there's some sort of distance that we can have when we're watching Netflix. We can push that computer away just a tiny bit. And although it is very visceral in some ways, it's not the same as being in front of a live performer, watching them have a real experience with an emotion. And Ryan and I do not, we don't fake cry on stage. We genuinely connect with our own experiences here and get to these points that hit us within this play. And there are different points every single night. There's different points with different audiences. There's different reactions to watching someone else in the audience have an experience and how it hits you while you're performing on stage in that moment. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to hold that space and stay with the audience and be able to cry and laugh and giggle and ache all together in the same room.
I think the show does a really good job of balancing that humor and a tough subject, because sometimes shows that deal with suicide or mental health can just be really
a drag.
Yeah. Draining to sit through, I mean, there are important things to do, but the humor in this is really...
I believe that people walk out of here with energy and the feeling of a call to action, whether it's in their own lives or in their larger community, but it really does inspire that energy and action in a way that some other pieces have not yet.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and that's the other, speaking of the sort of evolution of the show as we're on tour, the part that we're kind of excited, we're on a little break of a couple days before we hit the road again. As I get back on stage this week, I'm excited about bringing that balance to the whole evening, to the talkback as well. As I mentioned, that up until just recently has had a tendency to kind of revert to that tone of kind of the seriousness and the cautiousness that a lot of conversation about suicide, for example, or mental health in general, is sort of the default setting of like not wanting to trigger anyone and sort of being a little bit hands off about it. And so I'm curious to see where that line is in the discussion of keeping things productive, keeping things positive. And so a little part of that is of course after the show these days we've added in this thing of handing out Post-it notes and index cards and pens and asking everyone in the house to add their own brilliant things to the list, which actually get used in the shows subsequently. But that act of inviting the audience to focus on something really lovely or something that brings them joy, and writing it down. And then, I don't know, I mean, in my vision of it, all of a sudden when you write down, like, playing with my dog or watching the sunset or, going canoeing, then the next time you have a day off or an evening off, you're like, oh yeah, that thing that I love, I should go do that. I don't want to lie to those nice people who brought the trunk all the way to my town.
So you guys are on tour till the 22nd of July before you get a break, is that right?
Well, truly we're on tour through the beginning of August. August 4th right now is our last show that is currently booked. On the 22nd, I get to go back to Missoula and teach theater camp for 5 days, and Ryan actually has about 2 to 3 shows that week. So so break is real relative, but that's the first time that we'll be, have a day or two off or be able to see some friends and family again. But right now we're on kind of like the long northeastern tour of the state, where we're going to go up and hit Malta and Glasgow and Plentywood, and then go on to Glendive and everything from there. Lame Deer, Big Timber, Red Lodge, Bozeman, Belgrade. So we'll go down south and to the center of the state. And then Billings. I mean, there's so many places. It's hard to name them all.
Yeah, and you can find that schedule on the Grand Street Theater website.
GrandStreetTheater.com is where you can find it with the Every Brilliant Thing tour. Yeah, and we do have some Facebook events on there as well. So if you want to go to Facebook and like Grand Street Theater, you will start to see that they have all those events. So each date is connected to our Facebook as well.
And who are the other sponsors of the show?
Oh, yes. Town Pump, Blue Cross Blue Shield is our big contributor, as well as MDU Resources.
Well, it's been great talking to you guys. The show was awesome. I think it's a really important thing to get out there, and it was entertaining. I hope the rest of the tour goes well.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks
Yes.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Recovery Talks podcast from Montana's Peer Network. You can follow us here on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at our website, mtpeernetwork.org, so that you don't miss any of the great things that we have to offer. Have a wonderful day.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works, recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible. Recovery